You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello everyone and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. Today I have my favourite brothers in the room, Paul and David King, and I'm so excited to introduce you. Would you like to say hello?
Hello, my lovely wife. This is Paul.
And I'm Paul's brother and Ash's brother-in-law, David King. I guess together we are often referred to as the King brothers, which is quite nice. So, yeah.
I love that name, and I want to know, will you ever trademark it? Because I think you should.
Ooh, interesting. Probably not, but it is nice that we're known that way. I think more people know us as the King brothers than anything else. We've been around this, like the tech scene for about 10 years, I think. So we kind of, people know us as a pair, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it comes with its own advantages as well. Like, individually, you know, we are quite good. We're competent programmers, competent engineers, good networkers. But I think together it just comes with a little bit more clout. And it's kind of like in the yellow pages, if you're called aardvark something, you know, you're at the very top. I think something similar happens when it's the King brothers. You just sort of end up bubbling to the top quite naturally in these sort of scenarios where, you know, people are being talked about or referenced or thought about. So
I really like that you suggested aardvarks, because if anyone knows Paul King, they'll know that he's obsessed with snouts.
They are one of my favourite, snouts are majestic when you think about it. Anything with a snout is just far superior, I think, to any other kind of animal. So that's my personal opinion anyway. And
I guess as a husband, that's why you look past my big nose.
You don't have a big nose. You've got a lovely nose.
And as an uncle, all of Paul's gifts to my kids have been snout related, like elephants, aardvarks, yeah, all sorts.
Oh, wow. I hadn't put that together, but yeah, you're right.
It sounds about right. So I would love to hear about Flow Software Solutions. Who are the customers you serve? What do you do in that role?
Okay, so we didn't start out, I suppose, doing what we're doing now. We created the company Flow Software Solutions, but we were doing something completely different when we started about, I don't know.
It's about a year ago?
About a year ago, yeah. We were creating mostly software for vehicle route planning, and that did okay. You know, we were doing quite well. We won some accolades for that, and then we just decided to go in a different direction. So it's still Flow Software Solutions, but mostly now we're concentrating on real-time, multi-user, offline capable surveying apps. So try and do that. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but yeah, something very different to what we started out in, but also very closely related to what David did in his previous employment at Lucian Environmental. So I'm sure David can tell you a bit more about that.
Yeah, so to start with the route planning problem, I think that was in a big way me being kind of selfish in pursuing something that I was interested in. You know, this is an interesting problem mathematically. It's known as one of the NP hard problems, which is just a challenge. And, you know, as a programmer, as an engineer, you often pursue things that interest you, not necessarily because there's, you know, money or glory at the end of it. It's just a good way to think and learn. And it can be quite hard, or I think it can be quite a common problem to sort of muddle up the two. So you're pursuing something because you're interested in it, but you accidentally make a business, and that's probably not the best approach. So when Paul started working, well, it just kind of happened naturally. We just sort of merged together in our work. We really sort of looked at, you know, our skill set, our network, the problems that we've looked at in the past. And you know, there was a lot of sense in us pursuing surveying because of my background at Lucian. So Lucian are this local company that are national. They're very big. And in my time there, I was their software architect. And through my work and our work together, you know, we built a product that made a lot of money. to be frank. And so to come back to that problem, it's been really quite refreshing because I'm familiar with the industry. I can answer most of the questions myself. I am, in a way, my own customer. And so, like, to pursue that that's the sensible choice for a business, but it's not exactly the most stimulating. So I think you have to start looking elsewhere for mental stimulation, which is probably the right balance, actually.
I like that. And I have a question. So first of all, I want to say, Paul, ever the marketer, I like how you used search engine optimization words so that when the transcript for this podcast is created,
always think of the transcript.
You will get some backlinks there.
Yeah, of course. I'm always got to think of those keywords. I find myself, I get a little bit obsessed about these things, and if you can drop these things into conversation on YouTube videos or podcasts, then hey, great. I mean, what have you got to lose? So you try to just slip it into everyday conversation. I hope it comes across naturally. But yeah, of course, there's an element of that too. Well, pretty much any audio stuff that we do, I think.
So I really like that. I think it's good to be proud of what you're marketing. But my question is, when you were running Flow VRP as opposed to Flow Software Solutions, I would like to know about your social purpose. So Flow VRP did have a strong social purpose in that by saving time, you would also be saving emissions. Am I right?
Yeah, so obviously there's a big drive at the moment for more renewable energy and electric vehicles. And, we really liked the idea that we could build something which was going to save companies money and also get them onto electric vehicles, so drive electrification. And yeah, that was really one of the big factors for us. And, there's emerging companies like Zmove who they're doing pretty interesting stuff with, zero emissions cargo bikes. And that was one of the things that we were quite interested in. And we still are. It's just the business and the money has taken us in a bit of a slightly direction. And at the end of the day, we have to make ends meet, and we have to, we're just looking at the market and trying to figure out where we fit as any startup does, like this is, we think it's quite a natural process to pivot, to think about different things, not give up on things, but just naturally see where the market takes you. And that's kind of where we are right now. So mostly emphasize like working on the surveying stuff, but we'll see where it goes. The two things actually work quite hand in hand. At some point we may actually combine the two products into one. So it's interesting where we're at right now. I'm sure David agrees.
Yeah, so the social good that comes from like electrification, and if you look at Newcastle, we've got, well, actually all of the UK cities, we've got the low emission zone coming in, and I think that's a force for good. Certainly if you look towards Holland, I mean, their bicycle culture is enviable. I don't think anyone can doubt that. People often say that, it can only happen in places where there's great weather. But actually, if you've ever been to the Netherlands, it can be pretty wet and cold and miserable as well. So I think having that social good is vitally important. And, I don't think we've stepped away from that by going into surveying because, well, the surveying world, we're looking at the built environment. It's, these are people's homes. These are hospitals, prisons, schools, a lot in schools. And, if you can make those places better places, better environments, that's a good thing. So I think, not to sound trite, but I think actually there can be social good in almost everything you do. And certainly if you can add that angle in, it's always going to improve your mental health as well, to focus on those things.
And also part of the entrepreneurial journey is having cash, right? Being able to sustain yourself. So actually serving different customers is really important. And I know when we've had James Rutherford on this show, he spoke particularly around minimum viable product and fast failure. And I know he's one of your friends from way back networking days.
We love James. Just shout out to James. How much do we love James?
I love James. He's the best.
What a guy.
And the reason I mention that is I'm interested, do you have a tactical strategy or do you just go for it full steam ahead? How do you approach your ideas or how you run your business?
I think the fail fast strategy is definitely, there's a lot of logic to that. I think when you start a business, there's an inherent risk. You quite often quit your day job to do this full time. And it's a balancing act for sure. When I started, I went part-time. I was working with my dad as a programmer. And I went part-time 3 days a week. The other 2 days a week, I work with David. And then at some point, you've just got to then take that risk. And it's also worth pointing out that my wife, who sat right in front of me doing this podcast, is also doing an MBA. So it was double risk, to quit my job and to start a business. But at some point, then you've just got to have that belief that what you're doing is going to work. And my belief stems from my belief in myself and my belief in my brother. So I think between the two of us, we can achieve anything. It doesn't matter if something fails, we just move on. As simple as that. There's no point in dwelling on any failures, I think.
No, and I think with like this concept of MVP, like minimum viable product, there's a lot of emphasis on the word product. So like there has to be something finished. And actually I think that's kind of the wrong way around. So instead of fail fast, I would probably say sell fast, because the sooner you start selling to people, the more you realize what you actually have to do. So like right now we're in a situation where we've got like 3 customers coming onto the platform. We're busy onboarding them, and we're also busy just finishing off the product that we've said that we've built. I mean, we're not lying. We're not lying to these people. They understand fully our situation, and they know that our long-term goal is to have, more features that's going to, help their businesses in the longer term. But so, we're selling them on what we're busy building. And that's really, really useful, because if you can't get those sales on what you're building, like maybe you can't get those sales after you've finished, and that's probably more painful, because if you've sunk a lot of time into something, it's unpleasant to go back, or there's this attachment to what you've built and you don't want to let it go. So I think that can be a big problem in any line of work, any creative work, and engineering is very creative as well.
Yeah. Plus, there's a saying, don't be too precious about your MVP. Be prepared to just throw it away and do something different. Those early conversations with customers, they really have an incredible value. And also they become huge advocates for your product. And if you can get those huge advocates, you're probably onto something. So at the minute, we have some people who are referring us already and really shouting from the rooftops about us. And that's extremely promising. But it also makes us realize that we've probably got product market fit quite quickly. So there is value to that. So I definitely agree with what David's saying there.
Great. And I think maybe instead of minimum viable product, it's minimum viable solution, and you're working with your customers on the journey and Absolutely. Adapting. Mm-hmm. Great. So I'd like to know, David, you've been coding since you were 13, which is just insane. How did you get into it, and what tips do you have for young coders today?
Yeah, okay. So I'm coming up to 36, so that's 23 years of programming. And the landscape has changed like quite dramatically. But in a way, the fundamentals, I don't think they'll ever change, because like at the root of all programming is, you pick up a language, and the creators of these languages, all of them, they basically they turn logic into language. And so, if you can think rationally and you can think logically, you can pick up any programming language, really. I think my advice would be, don't get hung up on making the right choice. Just make lots of choices. And what I mean by that is, if you're thinking, do I learn language A or language B? Just pick one. It doesn't matter. Learn language B later, or learn them both in parallel. And what that gives you is it gives you the ability to learn. And I think that's probably the most important thing. And that has not changed in 23 years, and it probably won't change in the next 23 years. You might think about, machine learning or TensorFlow, or, there's a lot out there, but it's, just do what you enjoy. Try and find problems that you enjoy, and do that probably in your spare time. And if you're lucky enough to work in an environment where they encourage that in your working time, that's even better. But obviously in your work, you'd, really focus on your customers and your communication. So if you're working in a big team and you're spending all your time with your head down in code, you might not be working most efficiently, because you might be solving the wrong problem. I think that happens a lot, actually. So I think probably the best number one tip would be, go for the soft skills, actually, because they'll they'll help you move in the environment best.
Okay, that's really good to hear. Thank you so much. And I love that you talked about the soft skills, because sometimes there is this idea that coders just hang out in a back room and they don't have any knowledge of what's going on.
A lot of the time they do that as well, though.
Exactly. So that's really interesting to hear. And Paul, I'd like to ask you, so you came to coding very late in life compared to David, probably about 20 years after him.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
When you were about 33 maybe, rather than 13?
Yeah, that's right. So much later in life than David, that's for sure. And I knew I was technical, but I didn't, I didn't have any of the skills that actually I'd kind of wanted from mine and David's previous business. I'd managed to sort of wade my way through that without any coding skills. But I knew that I wanted to learn to code. So what I did was I just picked a project. I liked poker. I still like poker. And I decided I was going to make a poker game. And I think that's quite an important thing to do as a new coder. As you were talking about before, a good way to learn is just to create a project for yourself. You don't have to be employed to make a website or anything like that. I knew the dynamics of poker. I knew the technicalities and how it should work. So once you've got that idea of what it should do, you can start solving the problems to get you to that finished product. And essentially that's what David and I do now. We know where we want to be, and then we problem solve to get there. So it's no different. And then the next project becomes easier, and so on and so on. So I would highly recommend that as a way to learn. Pick something you know inside out, and just try and make it as a bit of fun. You'll find these stumbling blocks, and you'll just figure out. You'll learn to love Stack Overflow and find out how to answer these problems for yourself. That's really what it's all about.
And do you have any, you've mentioned some tips there, but do you have one top tip for people particularly coming to code later in life? For example, there are women coders or girl coders who are starting maybe, in their 30s or in their 50s and teaching themselves at any age to code. Do you feel that, you did mention some tips, but is there one thing you would say about confidence and learning when you're more mature?
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think anyone's capable of doing it. If you've got, as David said, some sort of technical skills, then I think that you can, if you just get stuck in, you can generally sort of figure it out. It's having that passion, that will to do it is quite important. If you just want to do it for the money, then you're probably not in the right game. So if you want to do it because you like solving problems and you like figuring things out, it's you probably love it. And I never feel like I do a day's work in my life because I love coding. It's great. Always learning. Anyone is capable of it for sure. Just surround yourself with the right people who are encouraging, people who don't hold you back. There's far too many people who say that you can't do something. I like to surround myself with people who say the opposite, who just lift each other up. And the networking scene in Newcastle is brilliant for that. And I go to quite a lot of the programming meetups, like PHP Northeast, which are excellent for just being part of the community and just really getting involved. So that's what I would suggest really to anyone, man, woman, teenager, whatever. It's that's the way to do it, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to follow that up with just something that I don't believe. And actually, I don't believe in this idea that as you get older, your capacity to learn diminishes. I think actually in a way the opposite's true. The more you learn, the more reference points you have. So for Paul to come into his mid-30s, I don't think that's a disadvantage because he's got other skills and to triangulate with. He's worked in tech support, he worked at Sage, he worked in bars, and Paul's a great people person. He's a good communicator. And just to tell a little story, when we pivoted away from Flow VRP, the routing problem, into the surveying problem, we tried to carry over a whole lot of the tech there, and that was largely tech that Paul was comfortable with. And after about a month of development, we realized actually there are some fundamental issues with what we're doing here, like that we're going to encounter in a year down the line, and let's see if we can solve those. And so what we ended up doing is we just sort of said, okay, this is not the appropriate technology, so we're going to pick something new. And it's something that I'd played with in a hobby way, and Paul had no exposure to it whatsoever. And I think Paul was quite trepidatious, and I just said, like, no, you'll be fine. And, Paul carried over, like, his ability to write tests. So tests is, in software, it's where you basically make assumptions about the code and then you programmatically add rigor to it. So Paul already had that sort of habit and behavior. It is from this previous framework, which was Laravel, and he applied them into this completely new environment, which was a huge boon to the project. So, no, I think as you get older, it's like, as long as you're open to learn and just okay to fail as well, you will learn. You will continue to learn, regardless of ethnicity, age, sex, sexuality. It's all go. Just your mind is your mind. It's your own.
I really love that, and that's definitely a value of this show that we like to share with people who are stuck and not enjoying their time, whatever they're doing, is that curiosity and learning and the courage to learn is really important. You mentioned you love going to work. So you both work in Hoults Yard. Would you like to tell everyone what it's like to be in that space?
Sure. So Hoults Yard is a great community. David and I, funnily, we ran into Charlie Hoult about 10 years ago or something like that. And Charlie had sort of flippantly said, we just got chatting to him, and he said, I've got a few offices down Biker Way or Oosburn. I can't remember what it was. So, we thought nothing of it. And then we saw Hoults Yard and we were like, wow, this is your couple of offices, Charlie. So it's just, a big sprawling sort of a group of buildings with some amazing businesses in. You've got chocolatiers, you've got a brewery. You could pretty much live there. I think nowadays you can get your hair cut. So it's a real difference to what I was doing with my father when I was working with him, which was just to work in a very small office, which is actually one of his old houses that he used to work from, and it was just the two of us. So that sense of community that you get at Hoults Yard is really important for me, and I know it's important for David too. It's also quite a cozy little place to work. You've got your nice warm radiator. You come in the morning, it's just really sort of just toasty and warm. You get your cup of tea. That sounds daft, but I love that. I love that space to just grow and to meet people.
Yeah, and I think within Hoults Yard itself, we've kind of got a bit of a reputation for being the guys that will sort of go out and meet everyone. And I know when Julie, the manager, is showing people around the offices, she always knocks on our door because we're always happy to have guests. And like those water cooler moments, there's two of us. There's me and Paul. So I know who I'm going to bump into every day. It's going to be Paul. Hey, Paul, having a cup of tea again. But with the shared spaces like the kitchen, and we've got some lovely neighbours. We've got Dawn from Dynamo. We've got Radial Path over the way. And, you're in the kitchen and I'm talking to, maybe 20 people every day, or, I'm bumping into the same 20 people, very frequently. And that's really important as well. I mean, I'm in a similar situation to Paul in that, he's worked in our dad's home office for a long time. For the 23 years that I've been programming, it's been on and off home offices for myself. And actually that can be a really lonely environment. And, it depends on your role. In a way, if you're on the phone all day, that's probably all right. If you're doing like Skype meetings and things like that, again, that's probably okay. But I think for a lot of what I've been doing, that loneliness has been a big strain on my mental health. And so when we were looking at offices, we looked in town, we looked at various different places. And when we came across Hoults Yard, it was this like almost like village-like feeling, and that was critical actually, because one of our goals with our business is not to just build the product, it's to build the work environment. We should be working flexible hours. I've got young kids, and I know, well, I don't want to make any assumptions, but there may be more children in the business in the future. I don't know, but I think it's regardless, like you should prioritize your life, whatever that looks like. And, your work is a huge part of your life. And if that's unpleasant, like try and make changes to make that better. Just do it. And so for us, Hoults Yard was like a good choice. I mean, I sound like a bit of a fanboy, but it's, it's just if you find yourself surrounded by cool people or interesting people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's really nice to hear that. And I think it's good to be a fan. Everyone needs a fan club.
What are your biggest fans, Ash?
I think you might be the one. But so moving on, I wanted to talk about time management, which you briefly mentioned, David. So you're running a business together. First of all, how do you guys divide your workload, your division of labor? But also, you're a young dad, you've got a young family, lots to think about, lots to do. How do you make sure everything gets done and you also spend time with your family?
Yeah, well, actually, today is quite a good example for me. So over the weekend, I had a couple of bad nights. I've got two kids. Theo's 2.5 and Eleanor's 4 months. And my wife is breastfeeding and she's also profoundly deaf. And that means that basically when she wakes up in the night, I wake up in the night. And it might not sound like much, but it can be quite demanding because when the morning comes and Theo wakes up at whatever time he chooses, it could be 6, it could be 7, 6 is okay, 7's okay, but it's that variation. I often find myself absolutely shattered. So this morning, I wasn't feeling great. I actually woke up at 10, so I was feeling a bit rough this morning, a bit poorly, tired as well. Like accumulatively, you can get very tired with young children. And, that's okay because I know I can rely on Paul. He can handle the fort. And so I think that's quite important as well. Flexibility it's very, very important, especially, last week was half term and, my kids are not at school yet, but I know other parents and that can be a very challenging time. So if you've got a work environment where you can work at home, or you can cut your day a few hours short so you can do the school run. That's like super important. And, I've said this again from day one with Paul. Our goal is to build a business that will not afford that lifestyle or justify that lifestyle, but, be a part of that lifestyle. So, we should be working shorter hours in general, I mean, we've had a few crunches recently, products being launched and customers coming on board, which has been, I've had like a few 16-hour days, don't get me wrong. And, when it comes to crunch time, you just got to get on with it. But, having that wiggle room is really important.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Paul, I know you love a theory. Do you have any tactics with time management, bunching your tasks? Or actually, there is a very important thing that you two do that I think the listeners should know about, and it's called a shambat.
Right, okay. Yeah, we can talk about the shambat. Well, first of all, I don't believe in switch tasking. So if I'm going to do some code, I'll set aside either half a day or a day to do that. I would never just try and do an hour here and there because it just doesn't work like that. And I think that's the same with any task, sales, marketing, whatever you want to be doing. If you're going to do it to your fullest capacity and your fullest skill, then you need to set aside a block of time. So that's number one, because if you switch task all day, you just never get anything done. That is so true. So the shambat, it's an age-old tradition in our family, I think. I'm not sure how far back it goes. But it can be anything in the room. You just, you designate something, the title of shambat. So it could be a pencil or a bit of water, a glass of water or whatever it is. And you don't need to say that it's the shambat. It just is inherently the shambat.
Oh no!
As soon as you pass this item, this object, onto your co-worker's desk. So in my case, when I pass this onto my brother's side of the table, he'll know that I want to talk to him. But the important thing is it doesn't break his concentration. So he can just carry on doing whatever he's doing. In programming terms, you would call it being in the zone. You don't want to break someone out of that because it can take a long time to get into that train of thought. You might have lots of different variables and things going on in your head that you're trying to keep hold of. As soon as someone disturbs that, boom, gone. So, and I think that's one of the disadvantages of working in a shared office space or something like that. Luckily, David and I are just in an office with the two of us, but the shambat is, yes, it's an incredible tool, ladies and gentlemen. So
it's sacred.
Yes.
Okay, and Paul, I would love to ask you, I know that you are an avid networking enthusiast.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to know, what are your top tips for networking and why should people do it?
Okay, yeah, I absolutely love networking. Mostly because I like meeting people and talking to people. So it's just my favorite thing, getting to know people.
I thought it was the free beer and the bagels and pizzas.
I mean, that certainly that certainly weights the decision to go networking. But my biggest tip would be to just never discount anyone. So I was at a networking event the other day, and a gentleman came up and started talking to me, and I asked where he worked, and he said Sintons. So, if you go to a lot of networking events, you're going to meet a lot of legal people from Sintons. It's just the way it is. But rather than kind of just writing him off and then start talking about myself, I wanted to know more. So I asked him what he did, and he said, "Well, I'm the managing partner. So I guess you could say I run the place." So I was stood there with the managing partner of Sintons, and then another gentleman came over, and he introduced himself, and he said he worked at the Northeast Times, which is the networking event. And I asked him what he did, and tried to drill down on that a little bit. And he said, "Well, I'm the chief editor of the Northeast Times." And so I was stood there with the two of those, obviously very influential, people, and really just lovely people, I think, in general. But another person came into our group. She asked what this gentleman did. He said Sintons, and she just discounted him immediately. And I felt very sorry for her, actually, because if she'd asked a few more questions and been a bit more inquisitive, a bit more curious, then she would have found out that this guy wasn't just some legal person from Sintons. He was the guy who ran Sintons. And I just thought that's how you should be at networking events. You have to just want to know what people do and really know what they do. I think that's important anyway.
Yeah, I'd like to share a secret. I don't know, is it a secret, your assist pipeline?
It's just a secret. I don't know, it's just something that I like to do.
Okay, yeah. So like in sales, you have this concept of pipeline where, you fill the top of the pipe with leads, and then you'll validate them, are they a good lead, and then you'll move them through the pipeline, and eventually you might get a sale, right? So Paul has this other concept, which is an assist pipeline, and it's part of his network, and I love it, because I'm a process kind of guy, and it's basically like if you go out and you meet people, your goal should not be to get something, but it should really be to give something. And I've seen Paul do this time and time again, and it's actually just really nice to see in action. So if you're going out and you're doing a lot of networking, you could meet lots of people, hundreds of people. And so, to have a pipeline where you've got a list of people that you want to go out and help, I think that's just a lovely thing. And, karma goes around in a very positive way in this situation.
Definitely. And I think you get the most out of your network as well. You get the most out of the experience if you go out there with a view to help people. When you say you're going to help someone, treat that with the same diligence and the same focus that you would for if someone was a sales lead. It's just the nice, gracious thing to do, I think. And if you do that, then you do end up building a network and building a community. And I think that's, I think more people need to think about it in that way, for sure.
And as the legendary Al Gibson would say, the fortune is in the follow-up.
Well, he's quite a character, your father.
So we are running out of time. I would love to know, you did run a business before and it didn't quite work out. And I want to ask, you're running a new one again together. What have you learned from your last business to help you in your new venture?
Ooh, good question. So I think personally, back then, that was, going on 10 years now. I think we were just a little bit more naive, a little bit less wise than we are nowadays. I think if we'd given up and just decided that's it, you're never going to do this again, then we wouldn't be where we are today. So I think it's important just to bounce back from things. I actually, to be honest, that business was a success in my eyes. It's never been anything other than a success. You know, we had amazing exposure and everything, but it just didn't grow into what we wanted it to. So I would say just keep those ideas flowing, keep creative, keep doing those things that inspire you, and you'll find your next thing within a short space of time, no doubt.
Yeah, we were very young. We didn't really have that much life experience, and I think that's probably the best thing you can bring to any venture is your experiences elsewhere. So, you know, we were trying to solve a problem that we had not experienced, and I think that makes it quite hard. And so, you know, when we're coming into new problems now, you know, we're drawing on our life experience as much as we can.
Yeah, for sure. It was a solution in search of a problem. I think that was what it was.
Thank you for sharing that, and it's so nice to hear how you coped with that and just your positivity around your previous business. It's so nice to see that no matter what you do, you have that approach that everything's still been a success because you've learned from it. I really like to hear that. I would love to ask my favorite question on every podcast, which is, what is your number one word to nurture your zest? Now, it can't be the same word together because you're very different people. So
I'm sure it won't be.
Paul, if you can tell me yours, and then David.
Okay. So I would say, I don't know, I'm trying to choose between peace or quiet. Now, I have a wife who's very boisterous and loud, and that also nurtures my zest, that's for sure. But if I really think about, you know, at the end of a stressful day, what I love to do is just to, you know, get my feet up and just watch a daft show, or just lie down in some sort of horizontal position. That I think that quiet and that quiet maybe would be my word. I don't know. It's kind of contradictory to my very loud and lovely wife, so she's going to hit me for saying that. But also, I love noise and boisterousness as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and David?
It would be either books or reading for sure. I think that's the only way you can go into another universe. Well, no, it's not the only way you can go to another universe, but I think it's the most surefire way of opening your mind, because you're letting someone else's words influence you. And I think that's amazing.
I love that, and I love reading. So I'm very excited that you've said that. I can't get enough of books at the moment, especially when I sneak books that are not textbooks. Okay, so we're all out of time. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and
You're
have
very welcome.
a lovely week.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.